Thank you. It's an honor to have our team, have four of the six members of our team on this call today. As Michael was saying earlier, it's just, we've been overwhelmed with the experience that we've had working with the team at Gary and having some of our team on the ground in Colorado. We're going to be spending a lot more time there. So having you all on the line and being received with open arms is really exciting. We know, along with helping ensure that, and I'll tell you a little bit about the firm in a little bit, but along with helping ensure that employee ownership expands across the nation, specifically expands in those communities that need it most, Black and Brown communities. Along with that, part of our job, along with everybody on this call, is to really evangelize employee ownership. And as many of you may know, the concept of taking a privately closely held business and turning it over to employee-owned business sometimes is referred to as conversion. So I often jokingly say, it's my job to evangelize conversions. And when I first started in the employee ownership world, I would say that, and folks were like, "Wait a second, what, is this some type of? Is he about to preach? Is this some type of spiritual sort of thing?" And in many ways, no, but in many other ways, yes. In many other ways, yes, it is. It really is. I believe, and our team believes, not only are we doing the work that's necessary to help shore up, stabilize, and create a more moral economy here in this country, but we also feel like we're doing the work that can actually change lives in the ways that a traditional conversion can change lives in a very real way. So we know we're quote unquote preaching to the choir. Everybody understands a lot of the power of the model. So we're going to focus a little bit more in our brief time here. We're focusing on what our firm does, the gaps that we believe that we fill in the market for employee ownership, and the opportunities that we're taking advantage of along with you all for the benefit of workers, for the benefit of owners, and for the benefit of our capital partners, one of which is the team from Gary on the line today. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my co-founder, Phil Reeves, and he can kick it off.
Awesome. So I'm Nikki and I are coordinating the chat. Perfect. I just got the screen share.
Did it work?
So what we'll do is quickly just take you guys through, here we go, to Todd's point, share a little bit more about A&H, a bit about how we operate as we see ourselves in the space. And then afterwards, happy to answer any question you guys may have. So first, just to open it up, I mean, A&H, our entire philosophy is around using employee ownership to better America. And we mean that broadly. So we're, super excited to develop what we call the elbow model, the win-win-win, employee-led buyout. And the idea was really to marry the concept of having owners who have built these great companies, workforces that have led these companies for a long time, have been in them, and then capital providers who have sought ways to kind of advance to, participate in the space, find a way to bring them all together. And the point is, everyone's here is beyond excited what we've done with Legacy Fund 1. And so we're extremely proud to have been above plan and closed on 30 to 40 million thus far and more to come. So why we do this is really around the whole idea around the racial wealth gap. And I don't think anyone here needs sort of the statistics, but I'll share them. For most of America, wages have stagnated. And so really, folks have been left with little opportunities to have what we, deem dignified retirement. And so you see in the chart here, wages have almost frozen from the last 40 years or so, but housing has risen 50%. And so really you've got this idea of the middle class being squeezed, and this is even more perpetuated in communities of color, which is squarely what we're focused on. And you see it every day. And so, I mean, these stats are from the Federal Reserve. And I think the big one that jumps out is 1 in 10 families have negative net worth. And so it's just untenable, if you will. And for people of color, a lot of net worth is derived from retirement assets, and, people broadly. And so 75% of Latinx workers and 65% of African American workers have $0 to retire. And so we see it like in, Michael comes to us from Silicon Valley. You see in Silicon Valley every day, there's RVs on the side of the street. And so these people they're working. Otherwise they wouldn't be in these communities. And so they're trying to make it work. And I just think, the A&H philosophy is you should be able to build a high quality life by working a quality job. And using employee ownership, we think, is a way to achieve that, where you don't have to start a business or found a company or achieve the beyond possible just to have a secure retirement. You can be a regular working everyday American and achieve the same. And really, our job, I think everyone's in this line's job, is to make that dream reality.
And I'll jump in there. One reason why we call out the percentages of and the gap between the retirement assets of Black and Latinx workers, BIPOC workers generally, in the general population, is that part of our thesis and part of our theory of change and part of our focus of our investment is focusing directly on BIPOC communities and BIPOC workforces. For those of you who know my background and know me, I started my work in the co-op world at the Democracy at Work Institute, which actually incubated Apex and Heritage Capital Partners. And part of the mission and vision of the Democracy at Work Institute is to help bring employee ownership, make it accessible to those groups who need it the most and who have had the least amount of access to it. And the numbers show and statistics show that when we're talking about these models of employee ownerships, particularly in the ESOP space, when you look at the co-op space, you start to see a lot more kind of Black and brown and BIPOC workforces. But when you're looking across employee ownership generally, and the power of wealth building using employee ownerships, there's a really a big deficiency, a big dearth in the number of workers of color and workforces of color. So we'll talk a little bit more about the types of companies that we look for. But one thing that's important to us is that across our portfolio, we impact as many workers as possible and specifically as many workers of color as possible. And go ahead, Phil. Sorry to cut you off. Keep on going.
No, awesome. And so I think, to Todd's point, really we're focused on the how of employee ownership. I think we've all been fascinated by the idea that we know this is the right thing to do. And really our role is to do a few things. One, communicate to the business community that this is the right thing to do, and communicate to the investor community this is the right thing to do. And along the way, we hope to bring policymakers, legislative folks, and actually working folks along with us so that hopefully we see this sort of grassroots movement. I mean, one thing we talk about a lot as a firm is we think of the entire spectrum of employee ownership as being important. Yes, we're sitting in the ESOP space, but co-ops, EOTs, collaboratives, if you want to, start that co-ops work and sort of incubating new co-ops, the Phoenix Fund work, it's all the same for us. And so we're really trying to educate the entire capital markets, the entire sort of investment system to say, this is a space that merits attention and can solve some problems that we all see in America.
And Phil always says, we think of we want the markets to begin to see employee ownership as essentially an asset class. And for people to say, in a portfolio that is focused on social good or is focused on sustainability, having a portion of your portfolio assigned to employee ownership, whether that's at the venture level, whether that's at the LBO level, whether that's, debt products, equity products. And so when we speak to the investor world, we say, hey, we are one swath, one cut, one type of investment product in the employee ownership world, but you need to figure out what your entire employee ownership portfolio is going to be.
Yeah. And so we all know this, around 7,000 ESOPs. I think this number started to plateau, and that's something that we're focused on squarely. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. 14 million employee owners, and we're hoping to increase not only that number, but the number of these owners that are people of color. And there's some great companies behind their concept. And this is something we show to owners all the time. There are companies and products used every day that are employee owned. Garney is a firm that does over $1 billion a year. They're employee owned. And so we're trying to demonstrate the scale of employee ownership to show that it's not just a niche offering and smaller projects and that all has a space. But we're really trying to elevate it to be sort of we reimagine capitalism is something that we like to say in terms. From a statistics standpoint, I think we all know the business outcomes that employee ownership provides in terms of productivity, profitability, job safety, but it works a penny here. It's a proven model that has been resilient through economic ups and downs. I think, Todd's on the board of NCEO, and they've done some work around how employee-owned companies survived in COVID, and they thrived. They work together, they achieve the impossible, and that's something we think everyone should have the opportunity to do. So quickly, I want to talk to you just a bit A&H's role in the market and transactions so that everyone understands that. I think the ESOPs are complicated, as evidenced by this chart. Let's just start with that. What we try to do is simplify it, particularly for business owners. We talk to business owners all day, all across the country. And we were on a call with the owner today who said, yeah, I looked at an ESOP, but my advisors told me not to do it. It was going to be too hard. It was too complicated. There were too many lawyers, too many accountants. It was going to cost too much money. And I wasn't going to get full value for my business. And that's a lot of what we kind of see as our value proposition. A lot of owners today want to retire. The silver tsunami of baby boomers exiting companies is $10 trillion by some estimates. Those owners want to find a way to transition their company to their employees. The problem is, you see on the left, today they're asked to carry a really big seller's note. So they're asked to loan the company money for 10, 15 years. And that just presents two problems. One, that's not a real retirement. They still have to, the vast majority of the net worth is tied up with this company. And then two, for a lot of owners, particularly owners of color, that's not enough income to survive and retire. They don't have the net worth to do that, to live off the interest. Never mind the fact that the structure itself is complicated. And, we see ourselves as sort of providing the second option, which is, look, A&H is going to quarterback the transaction for you. We're going to deal with all the lawyers, all the accountants, all the trustees. We're going to help defer some of those costs because they're our due diligence costs. And ultimately, we're going to provide financing so that you can get a real exit. And that's our place in the market, and that's where we shine.
If I could just quickly chime in to say, Todd often says, and it's true, our model doesn't require an altruistic owner. We don't need an owner to take less than market. We don't need an owner to carry a massive seller's note to do the right thing. And I think from a public policy point of view, we've spent a lot of time in government, and it's wonderful. It's a bipartisan policy area to support through tax policy, and that's terrific. But all of this hassle means that it's not a real retirement for owners, and it's complicated. And so we exist to make retirement easy for owners. And then when you do that and they get their full value, a lot of owners do want to leave their company to their employees. They know who grew the business with them and for them. And there's a real sense of obligation and loyalty. It's just the hassle that gets in the way of those transitions. And that's why we're here, to make it easy for owners to do what they want to do.
And I'd like to say the way that we're able to grease the wheels of employee ownership using this model, Phil talked about it from the capital end. The seller doesn't have to carry the large seller's note anymore. The high exploration costs of the feasibility study. Our model wraps that feasibility study cost, that's part of our typical due diligence. That's what we do when we're doing DD on a company. We talk about kind of bringing in this whole outside world of professionals, from a trustee to the evaluator to the lawyers who specialize in employee ownership of the class of like Jason and team. Our team, we've really established a platform, and we're working with, for those of you familiar with SES advisors, they're partners in this, or transaction partners in this work with us. And they come into every transaction to help ensure that it's structured in a way that's going to help achieve the impacts and outcomes. As you all know, with these transactions, a lot of times, they require senior debt. Our investment model requires us to bring in a senior lender on the transaction. We have our fund and our team have a partnership with one of the largest CDFIs in the nation, LISC, who's also mission aligned and wants to see more employee ownership. And LISC will be partnering with us on all of our transactions to bring in the senior lending. So really, what we've tried to do is create what Phil often refers to as a platform. It's not just our team, it's our team and a team of teams that are coming together at different points in the transaction to reduce frictions and to, again, make this more expansive for the workforces that we're looking for. So just accentuating some of the things you said, Phil.
Absolutely. So I'll skip over this thing. We touched on it, but I mean, I will touch here on, the idea of ownership culture. We haven't talked much about that yet, but, for us, if we put in place employee ownership of any form, particularly ESOP, it's just a cool retirement account. And it's awesome. And really, the way we think about it is, if we want to see the benefits of employee ownership, we need to engage employees. We need to have quality jobs. We need to have open book management, human-centered HR. We need to treat people with the dignity they deserve. And so that's the way, as a part of our model, every transaction is bringing in partners like the Democracy at Work Institute, like some of our advisors, to ensure that companies are being coached toward this idea of we're all in this together, and reap the benefits of it. Briefly, for us, we mentioned the idea that we're focused on communities of color. And so that means that we invest in sectors where communities of color over-index. So it's what we call the real economy, landscaping, nursing care, waste hauling, sectors like that, which is why we're in, happen to be looking at a company in Colorado that fits this mold now. And so potentially could actually be our first transaction. But one thing I will say is, in addition to touching workers of color, these are also great places to invest, just from a classic investment standpoint. There's recurring revenues, low CapEx, a lot of demand. These companies, we see companies that have been through COVID, and we've seen companies that have increased revenues because of it. So we're beyond excited about the opportunity to take really high quality businesses and match them with workforces that deserve to own them. So we just took this picture a couple of weeks ago, so we're so excited about it. The guy on the left is so handsome. So 90 years of experience among our team, $45 million into capital invest today, 3 teams across the country, and we're super excited about that. What that means is we can work anywhere, in any time zone, in any industry, and provide value to teams need the most. That's really what we're all about.
Well, and Phil, go into a little bit more detail on some of the criteria that we look at for some of our companies, because I think the folks on this call today are going to be keeping their eyes open.
Sure. Here, I glossed over it so fast. It's on the bottom right of this chart. We're looking for companies that have at least 40 employees. And of those employees, at least 1/3, 33% of people of color. And I'll mention here that we're completely agnostic to the current ownership. Black, white, doesn't matter. What we're focused on squarely, though, is the composition of that workforce. We're looking for companies that are doing $1 million in cash flow or profits or EBITDA. And really, what you're hearing me say is we're looking for high quality businesses. And when you find a company that has that size of a workforce in these sectors with that level of profitability, you're going to find a business that should last for the long term. That's all we care about, because it's ultimately the employees.
Just to point out the headline there too. So because we are interested in driving wealth into workforces of color, along with the entire workforce, we have concentrated on the essential service sector, like Phil said, but it also skews towards more female workers. So we will also wind up benefiting women-led households disproportionately with this strategy.
So briefly, I mentioned our set of advisors, folks from the investment space. Michael Corey has been a senior executive at an ESOP. All that to say that it's a team of people that are dedicated to the mission and can provide real value to this set of portfolio companies. Todd mentioned our partners. SES has done over 1,000 ESOP transactions. The new market support team at LISC is one of the leading new market support tax credit firms in the country. And then the Democracy at Work Institute and Records, can say more about them. Dow we incubated A&H. And so, it comes out of the co-op employee ownership space. And really the impetus behind our work was Dowie and Todd's probing question of how can we use employee ownership as a tool for wealth of people of color? And I think our team saw the opportunity that if you want to do that, you need to make a concerted effort to do that. You need to make a concerted effort to do that with capital.
And I'll add to that, and Jen, I know Jen will be in agreement with this, which is the idea of an ESOP in and of itself is a cool retirement plan that can have some really powerful wealth building benefits. But if you want to create quality jobs and companies where employee ownership is actually part of the strategy for how the company is going to grow, how it's going to do better, how it's going to get better margins, how it's going to increase retention and be more competitive, then actually working on the internal culture of the firm to create a culture of ownership where you're able to really tap into what more and more research is showing is that the most valuable resource you have in your business is your human resource. And we think that employee ownership is the most powerful, most direct, and most beneficial and the most fair way to really tap into and expand the power of the human resource of your workers to expand the business. So our partnership with the Democracy at Work Institute, bringing in these best practices from the world of employee ownership, including the world of co-ops, open book management, human-centered HR, democratic governance. All of our workforces will have worker representatives on the board. Like all of these are the sorts of things that create quality jobs and that really allow companies to grow and to last longer and be better companies through employee ownership. So excited about that partnership, as well as our partnership with SES, New Market Support Company, and all of our investors.
So on that note, I'll close with this. We're beyond excited for our investor base, and Catherine, Santosh, Gary, the team in Colorado. It always amazes us the benefits of having good partners. And so you see some of our partners here. We're excited about the reception we've gotten thus far in the market and look forward to executing what we think is going to be a great fund and a great strategy. And so I'll stop there and happy to open it up for any questions.
And I'm going to just jump into though you could leave that one up actually, Phil, if you want.
Sure. Oh, I pulled this. Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's better to yeah, we'll leave that off. But I'll actually ask Jason's question, which he asked in the chat. And that was, why did we choose to use the ESOP structure for our transitions into employee ownership versus any of the other structures? So I'll hand that to you, Phil or Todd.
And if you guys don't mind, before we do that, I want to pass over to Catherine from Gary Community Investments and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and say something, and then we can hop to the questions after that. Sorry about that.
Sure.
This is Julie. I can kick us off.
Oh, hey, Julie. Okay, didn't see you on there. Hey, Julie.
That's all right. Hey, Catherine. Hey, Santosh.
Oh, and Santosh. Okay, excellent.
There he is. Yeah, we all made it. Now, I feel like it's important, that brand new glossy picture of who is the team at A&H, with all of those nice faces. I couldn't help but notice that there were 3 offices. And I just want everyone on this call to know that we have applied not so steady pressure for that number to go to 4. It feels like they're missing a Midwestern presence that would help them to concentrate more energies in this particular geography. So for what it's worth, Natalie, Michael, we're hoping to host as many lunches as that takes for you to decide that you might want to hang out with us here in Colorado more often.
Love it.
Yeah. I love it, Julie. I love
What's it going to take? What's it going to take? No, I just want to acknowledge on behalf of Catherine and Santosh and the Gary team. My name's Julie, and I head up investments and family economic mobility. And I think it probably goes without saying that the slideshow you just saw provides very clear clarity for me and alignment around what Gary is actually really all about. Like, this is a mission-aligned investment in every possible way for us. We're a sunsetting fund, and our goal is to bend some population level trends for children and families. And those are in early childhood, they're in youth success, but for the purposes of this call, they're around family economic self-sufficiency and mobility. And I think that you here know better than most audiences that not only is this a wage growth opportunity, but at the end of the day, to be real fair and real frank about what works, the chance to own assets that appreciate in value, the chance at generational wealth transfer is in fact the most powerful, most effective lever that any of us can pull if we believe in family economic mobility. There's actually no amount of wage growth that can do what wealth building can for low and middle income families. And so for us, this is both an endorsement and a moment of gratitude to the A&H team for launching what you have and doing it on the premise and the values that we find so compelling. And then also a chance for me to let all of you know that in the next 2 days, actually, the timing here is beautiful. Gary's going to open what we're terming a search for solution. And we're actually asking our community, that being Denver, but also the national community, how it is that we might create more opportunities for families to increase their income, to decrease their expenses, and strategically for this conversation, how families might have more opportunities to own assets that appreciate in value. And so I want to just do the shameless plea and pitch right here that if any of you here have real smart, thoughtful answers to that question, and I know have networks who think carefully and often about that question, our search is really to understand what is already out there that can be grown. This is a perfect example. What's not out there that we can build together, and where is it that policy changes will let us move barriers out of the way. And so your responses and participation in the search for solution, which again will open on Thursday, will make us smarter and stronger and better, and would deeply honor us if you would like to participate.
Yeah, I just want to kick off with one question for the A&H team. Why do you guys love Colorado so much? Like, why? Anyway, we want to pass it on to the group to jump in and ask questions, please.
Thank you all. Julie, you gave us goosebumps with your remarks. So, but back to the prosaic. So the question on the table at the moment is, why did we choose ESOPs? And maybe I'll turn to Todd to kick that off, because he really was his vision at the very beginning that launched A&H.
Yeah, no, excellent question. As Michael was saying earlier, we're supporters of the entire world of employee ownership. And I think the general sense is that more employee ownership, more democracy in the workplace, more control by workers is better than less. So whatever the means, EOT, ESOP, cooperative and beyond, we're in support of. Actually, when we think about our model, oftentimes when we discuss our model and kind of that hybrid between the ESOP and the co-op kind of cultural and governance pieces, we sometimes use the term ESOPerative, which we did not create. I first heard that in reference to a company called Sunlight and Power, but really love the power of, we bring together this, and this is part of the ESOP, the extremely powerful tax benefits of ESOP, which a lot of people don't know are also shared in a lot of ways in the co-op world. There's some similar tax structures in the co-op world. But I think the other piece of it for us is the fact that the ESOP model has been on the books for almost 50 years, was created with the same piece of legislation that created the 401k. There's a long legislative and a history around it. And it provides some very solid, very strong kind of guardrails and boundaries that, in our opinion, kind of helps for better transactions for the workers. One of the reasons why some of the regulatory quote unquote hurdles exist with the ESOP are to help ensure that workers aren't getting taken advantage of, aren't overpaying for firms. And as a provider of capital to those workers, but also as a investor in these firms, is also really important for us that we don't overpay for the firms, because if we're overpaying, then the workers are overpaying for the firm. So there are several kind of aspects of the ESOP model that really make for what we feel are better transactions than we would face if we just went out kind of as a traditional PE firm. We always feel like, hey, in a way, kind of Uncle Sam is behind us supporting these transactions, making sure that it's fair for us, our investors, and fair for the workers. And it's that structure, those tax benefits, and the true wealth building potential. The average worker has over worker in the ESOP has over $130,000 in their ESOP account, and almost $100,000 in another diversified account. So, a 401k on top of their ESOP account. So it's just, again, it's the most powerful wealth building tool that I've seen in this country that's accessible and available to regular everyday working class folks. And that's why our team loves it so much.
Sandy, to your question around EOTs, I think they're starting to get rise in popularity. Actually, there's a I heard a rumor of a $50 million plus.
Phil, just because maybe not everyone's reading chat, do you want to repeat the question?
Oh, sure. The question is, are you seeing much EOT, so employee ownership trust? And I'll have to defer to others who are more versed in the concept. But the idea is you would move the company into a sort of perpetual trust, and that the employee ownership would be permanent. It can never be sort of undone. We are seeing more, and I think there's people. That's what makes the space so exciting. Is I think as more and more attention is coming to the space, particularly from the investor side, the capital side, the business side, people are finding ways to execute different strategies. And so there's a group, I've heard of groups looking at EOT very closely. I've heard of I think it was an $80 million EOT that was getting put together. So, I mean, I think once you hear of a few really big examples, that's what it takes for all of these things really, is just a few big examples showing the path. And then I think all the other stakeholders start to come along.
If just as a PS to that also, in our deck, in the interest of time, we pushed to the back and didn't play for you, but in our deck, which I'm sure we can circulate, there are 2 linkages to employees who work in an ESOP firm who talk. They were both single moms, and they both share their experience of the power of watching their retirement account grow, and being able to know that if something happens to them, their kids are going to be okay, or one of the women is able to put her kids through college, through law school, as a result of the ESOP. So it's a very powerful confirmation of the phenomenon that we and that Julie has talked about having assets, not just income, and the security that creates for workers, and that's the ESOP helps establish that too.
I guess my question, I've been in the situation recently to see a couple companies really because they couldn't get seller financing actually go the route of private equity or and other searches. And so, I think the question is, I love what you guys are doing. How do we get more people to do that? How do we take the bigger picture and solve this bigger issue of, we talk about loan guarantees here in Colorado. There's really good companies that are going to get absorbed frequently by what we call strategic buyers or private equity, just because we can't find financing. And I've been in that situation recently where it was a wonderful employee-owned company. I would love to see them go somewhere else, and we literally couldn't find anyone to do other than private equity. Private equity loved them. And so I think that was a really interesting. I was like, yeah, there was no shortage of that. But on the employee ownership. So how do we solve the bigger issue here? What can we do as a commission to take this to the higher level?
So I'm going to just interject before Phil and Todd or Natalie answer, but I want to say you're exactly right. And you're not only right about Colorado. This is a national phenomenon. So today, in the US today, there are 4 million companies that have at least one employee, so not a sole proprietorship. 2.5 million of them are owned by baby boomers. Okay, so pause and think about that. 2.5 million companies owned by people who are hitting retirement or at retirement. And if you ask baby boomers what are their plans for exit, depending on which survey you look at, 60% don't have an exit plan. They don't know. So there's going to be a massive transition of small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses over the next 5 to 10 years that fundamentally change the entire fabric of the country. And there are not enough buyers right now for them. A lot of them will shut down. So this is a crucial question that you're asking, Jen.
And from a capital perspective, and generally, Jen, you're kind of getting to our, we have our objective, our mandate for this fund, but our longer term kind of theory of change is to be really a demonstration to the broader capital markets that this is not only a feasible way to invest your money, not only a sustainable way, not only a responsible way to invest your money, but it's actually a good way. Like it can provide you with a properly risk-adjusted returns. When you look at the returns that we target for our investors within the fund, they are, upper quartile mezzanine credit, returns as good as what they could find on the market for a commensurate amount of risk. We believe in our perception. So it's our belief, our first fund, we're really excited to have the capital partners who are willing to take a chance with this model. But we do imagine, and they do imagine, that in fund 2, fund 3, fund 4 down the line, we'll be able to have a CalPERS or a New York State Teachers or a Texas Retirement System. These large institutional investors, your large insurance companies, if they're able to see success in funds like ours, and some of the other funds that are out there doing employee ownership models, from the Start.co-ops to the Phoenix funds to the Mosaics of the world, if they're able to see success and they know that they can move their capital into this model, and as government officials and folks working at state and municipal levels start to put pressure on these companies. I saw a story today about how pension funds, some of the states are starting to recognize that some of the state pension funds are making great returns, but the externalities of those investments are causing more damage and more cost within the state than the actual returns that they're getting. So you're investing in private equity funds or other funds that are getting great returns, but they're moving jobs out of your state or they're moving jobs out of your city. So to have an investment model that says, hey, you're going to be able to get returns, but you're also going to be anchoring companies, anchoring jobs, building wealth amongst a broader group of people in your society, including workers of color. We think once people start telling that story and start demanding that from these players, then it's going to happen at a broader level. I do want to take a second and pass it over to Natalie Edwards on our team. And really, that comparison between what we're doing and traditional private equity and private credit is something we hear about a lot. And Natalie, if you can touch on that and how we think about that as a team.
Yeah, no, I tell the guys, and I think we all agree, that when you stack us up against traditional capital that's coming in, or traditional private equity that's coming in terms of what they need from a growth perspective, or what they need from operational efficiencies perspective, we're going to win that every time, because we're not trying to take these companies and over lever them. No offense to my colleagues, but we're not trying to take these companies and over lever them, overburden them, or create operating models that aren't sustainable long term. I think we're very much focused on that. And then just to add to the dialogue around why is capital not here, I'm not sure. I'm a bit confused by it, to be honest, because when I look at the default rates on employee ownership companies, and they're so low. And I think to myself, because I spent about a decade working for Citibank. I was a managing director there. And I look at the numbers coming out of these companies, from productivity to, returns to retention rates, et cetera. And I'm really confused. I'm confused why there isn't more capital there. And I think part of it is a lack of familiarity, right? So there's a marketing branding push that we have to do. But then I'm wondering if some of it too is how these kind of more traditional capital actors have been adjusting their own underwriting standards and system, in response to financial crisis, followed by COVID, followed by what have yous. Because it's not right. It's almost like they're shrinking the airball that they're comfortable with. They're shrinking the numbers that they're willing to put into these communities. So I wish I had an answer. I really don't, Jen. I really don't. But I know that is what we need to attack. And when Phil talks about what we intend to do, we very much intend to attack that.
And one of the reasons that we love forums like this and love working with Gary and some of our other investors is because we do see ourselves as telling the story broadly, Jen. I mean, if you look at Muhammad Yunus, who conceived of microfinance and lending in Bangladesh, nobody followed him. Nobody. He says, the bankers all laughed at me. And the first fund was $25 million. And last year, $6 billion went into microcredit around the world. So that's, you just need to show capital markets are lemmings. And so somebody's got to be a leader. And that's what all of us are trying to be.
I see that Halisi is saying that, over a half decade in venture capital, and she'd never heard of ESOPs. And I spent, 2 decades in corporate America, and I'd never heard of ESOPs being used this way either. So that absolutely is the first hurdle we've got to get over. Like, people, it just needs to flow into the lexicon. I don't know if we need to find the right screenwriters and have them mention it in the movie, or what that stickiness is, but we definitely need, that needs to be part of the conversation, the beginning of the conversation.
Well, let me just say thank you to the commission and to your work in this field. We are obviously all out there in the vineyard toiling together to make this more robust and make it a wonderful vintage for employees and employee ownership. And as our friends at Gary certainly know, we do love Colorado, and we are very happy to come out as often as we can.
Yeah, on behalf of the commission, I want to thank all of you from A&H and Gary for coming and sharing your story and your vision. It's incredibly compelling, exciting, inspiring, and we're here as your biggest fan. So thank you so much for coming and sharing.